Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at The Last Letter by Rebecca Yarros, and hopefully helping you decide if it's something that you want to add to your to-be-read list.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worth saying right off the bat, this is a very beautifully written book, but it is a total tearjerker. So, if you're not in the mood for something really emotionally intense, you might want to skip this one. But if you are, this could be your next book hangover.
All right, so a little bit of a content warning there for anyone who might be sensitive to that. But to help make that decision a little bit easier, we're going to break down Yarros' writing style and really dive into the themes and the content, and even compare it to some of her other popular books.
By the end of this deep dive, you should know exactly what you're getting yourself into and whether or not this book is for you.
Okay, so let's start with something I've heard a lot about, and that is Yarros' writing. What is it about her writing, specifically in The Last Letter, that is so captivating?
Yarros has this uncanny ability to really pull you into the story. With her words, she creates these immersive experiences, and she's not afraid to kind of like go there with the raw emotion and the language that she uses. I mean, it's both beautiful and it's heart-wrenching at the same time.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that said about her books before.
Yeah,
She really knows how to pull at your heartstrings.
she does. For example, there's this one line where Ella, the main character, describes her grief. She says, "This wasn't heartbreak or sorrow. It was the utter desolation of my soul." Like that one sentence, you can just feel it, you know?
Wow, yeah, that's heavy. Okay, so what kind of story is she telling that evokes these really intense emotions?
Well, the story revolves around Ella, who is a single mother facing a pretty unimaginable challenge, her daughter's cancer diagnosis. And in the midst of all of this, she finds some solace in letters that she's receiving from her brother's best friend, who is a soldier known only as Chaos. We later learn his real name is Beckett.
Okay, so we've got childhood cancer, a military connection, already sounds pretty emotionally heavy. Anything else that readers should be prepared for?
Well, on top of that, this book really dives into themes of death and the challenges of single parenthood. And military grief, there's even a hidden identity romance aspect to it.
Wait, a hidden identity. So there's some like mystery and romance kind of woven into all of it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting because reader reactions to this book, I've noticed, are very divided. Some readers felt like the constant tragedy was just too much for them.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, is there any light in this book or is it just relentless sadness?
It's definitely a roller coaster. Some people felt almost emotionally manipulated, while others praised Yarros for her really raw and realistic portrayal of these like really tough challenges in life.
So it sounds like it could be a really powerful reading experience,
Yeah.
but maybe not for everyone.
Exactly. It's a story that really demands a lot from you as a reader. I mean, both your attention and your emotions. So if you're looking for something lighthearted and fluffy, this is definitely not the book for you.
Gotcha. Okay, so before we get too deep into the themes, I do want to talk a little bit about the characters. What makes these characters stand out?
Well, Beckett, who's the love interest, he's portrayed as this incredibly devoted and supportive guy. Like
Yeah.
he's willing to do literally anything for Ella and her kids.
Okay, so your classic knight in shining armor, but with a military background.
Pretty much. But his decision to keep his identity hidden from Ella, that's actually a pretty big point of contention amongst readers.
Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, is that like a noble lie situation or is it straight up betrayal? I'm already kind of hooked.
That's the question, right? Some people love him for his dedication, but other people really question, like, what are his motivations here? And it definitely adds a whole other layer of complexity to their relationship.
Okay, and what about Ella? What's she like?
So Ella is definitely a strong character. She's facing unimaginable hardship with a lot of resilience. But even her strength is tested. And some of the choices that she makes, like for instance, she tears up a check that she receives from her children's father, and that left some readers scratching their heads.
Wait, she tears up a check. Why would she do that? Is it like a pride thing?
It's a little more complicated than that. It really speaks to her fierce independence and her struggle to accept help, even when she really needs it.
Okay, so she's not just like a stereotypical, struggling, single mom character. She's got some depth to her.
For sure. Now, before we get into the ultimate recommendation, I think it would be helpful to compare The Last Letter to some other Yarros books, just to give everyone some context.
Okay, yeah, that's a great idea. Fourth Wing is super popular right now, so I'm curious, how does The Last Letter stack up against that?
So Fourth Wing is a completely different beast. I mean, it's a fantasy romance, it's got dragons and action and adventure. It's a much lighter and more escapist read compared to the emotional intensity of The Last Letter.
Okay, so not really a good comparison then. What about something like The Things We Leave Unfinished? That one also deals with family and complicated relationships, right?
That's a much better comparison. The Things We Leave Unfinished, that book shares a similar kind of emotional depth, and it explores family secrets and second chances.
Okay, so similar vibes, but maybe not as heavy on the tragedy.
Yeah, exactly. So it offers a similar emotional journey, but you're not constantly being like gut punched the way you are in the last letter.
Okay, well, that's helpful to know. So if you're digging Yarrow's writing style, but maybe you're not ready for the full-on emotional roller coaster of the last letter, The Things We Leave Unfinished could be a good alternative.
Yeah, definitely. It gives you that same like depth of feeling, but without quite as much heartbreak.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm dying to know, after all of this, do you ultimately recommend the last letter? Is it worth the emotional investment? But before you answer that, let's take a quick break, and we'll get into it right after this.
Okay, so is the last letter worth reading? I think the answer is yes, but it really depends on what you're looking for in a book. I mean, it's definitely emotionally intense.
Yeah, for sure. You've described it as very emotionally intense, and I'm intrigued, but also a little bit hesitant. Are we talking like full-on devastation here?
It can be devastating, yes, but it's also incredibly moving and uplifting at times. I mean, remember that line about Ella's soul feeling desolate? Well, that's not the whole picture. Yarros does a great job of balancing out the heartbreak with moments of real joy and connection, and even humor.
Okay, so it's not just like wallowing in misery the entire time.
Yeah.
Because I think while I can appreciate, beautifully written prose, I need at least a little bit of hope to keep me going.
I hear you. And yeah, Yaros definitely delivers on that. There are some really heartwarming moments, especially the interactions between Beckett and Ella's kids, the twins, Colt and Maisie. He forms this amazing bond with them, almost like a father figure.
Oh, that's so sweet. So there's some real warmth there amidst all the heavy stuff.
Absolutely. And honestly, those moments make the emotional punches hit even harder because you're so invested in these characters and their happiness by that point.
Yeah, I get that. It's like those movies that are supposed to make you feel good, but you end up sobbing because you just care so much about the characters.
Exactly. So to answer your question, is it worth reading? I think if you're looking for a lighthearted escape, probably not. But if you're willing to go there with these characters and really experience their pain and their triumphs, then yes, I think it's absolutely worth the emotional investment.
I'm getting the sense that this is the kind of book that stays with you for a while after you finish it.
It is. It's one of those stories that really makes you think about your own life and your own relationships and the things that really matter.
So it's more than just a romance novel. It kind of delves into some pretty deep stuff.
It does. And you know, one of the most interesting things about this book is Beckett's decision to keep his identity hidden from Ella. Like I said, it's a controversial choice, and readers are really divided on whether it's justified or not.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. And to be honest, I'm leaning towards not okay. I mean, how can you build trust with someone if you're not being honest with them? What are people saying about it in the reviews?
Well, some people defend him, saying his intentions were good. You know, he was trying to honor his friend's dying wish and protect Ella from more pain.
I get that, but hiding a huge part of who you are, I mean, that just seems like a recipe for disaster down the line.
And that's exactly what a lot of readers are saying. It's like no matter the intention, a lie is a lie. And it ultimately undermines the foundation of their relationship.
Yeah, like even if it started out as a noble lie, it's still a lie. Okay, so that's something I need to really grapple with as a reader. I have to say, though, the ethical dilemmas are kind of fascinating to me.
For sure. It adds a lot of depth to the story. It makes you think about what you would do in that situation and what really defines true love and honesty.
Yeah, you're really selling me on the complexity here. Okay, so we've got the emotional intensity, the questionable decisions, and the beautiful writing. What else should readers know before they dive in?
One more thing that's pretty divisive. The ending, let's just say it's not everyone's cup of tea.
Oh, suspenseful. I don't want any spoilers. Can you give us a hint without giving anything away?
Let's just say it was a bold choice by Yarros, and it definitely leaves an impact. Whether that impact is good or bad really depends on the reader.
Okay, so maybe not your typical happily ever after situation.
Yeah.
But as long as it feels like authentic to the story, I can handle that.
I think that's a great way to put it, and I think ultimately that's the question every reader has to answer for themselves. Does the ending feel earned and true to the journey these characters have been on?
Yeah, I like that. It's not just about whether it's happy or sad, but does it ring true? So, based on everything we've discussed, who do you think would really connect with this book?
I think anyone who enjoys emotionally intense stories with complex characters and thought-provoking themes. I think those readers would find a lot to love in The Last Letter. It's a book that will stay with you long after you finish it. And, it might even change the way you view love and loss and resilience.
That's powerful. Well, I have to say, you've definitely piqued my interest. I'm still a little bit apprehensive about the emotional roller coaster aspect, but I'm really intrigued by the character dynamics and the ethical stuff we talked about.
I think it's definitely a book that rewards readers who are willing to really go there, with an open mind and an open heart.
Well said. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive with a final recommendation and maybe some parting thoughts for our listeners. Stick around, folks. You won't want to miss this. All right, so we are back and ready to kind of wrap up our deep dive into The Last Letter. I have to say I'm feeling a lot more informed now, but also maybe a little emotionally drained just from discussing it.
Yeah, I get it. It's definitely one of those books that kind of stays with you, even when you're just talking about it.
So for our listeners who are still on the fence, let's try to distill everything down into a clear recommendation. Read it or skip it. What do you say?
Okay, here's the bottom line. If what you want is just like a light, fun, escape, then this is probably not the book for you. But if you're someone who really enjoys stories that kind of dig into, the complexity of human emotions and relationships and that deal with some really tough themes, then The Last Letter might be right up your alley.
So not a beach read, but maybe more of a transformative experience kind of a book.
Right. It's a book that'll stick with you and make you think and maybe even shift your perspective on certain things.
And what about the writing itself? I mean, we talked about Yarros' writing style, how it's so immersive, but how does that play out in a story that's this emotionally heavy?
Well, I think that her beautiful prose and her ability to evoke those raw emotions are exactly what make this book so powerful. She doesn't shy away from the pain and the heartbreak, but she also portrays those moments of joy and connection and resilience with just as much intensity.
So the writing kind of heightens the experience instead of weighing it down.
Absolutely. It's like she chooses each word so carefully to create like a visceral reaction in the reader. So you really feel Ella's grief and you understand Beckett's struggles and you're rooting for their happiness, even when it seems impossible.
Yeah, and that's what makes a story really memorable, right? When you feel like you've actually lived through it with the characters.
Exactly. And I think that's what The Last Letter does. It gives you a chance to experience that whole spectrum of human emotion in a story that's beautifully written and really makes you think.
Okay, so to wrap things up, if you're looking for a book that's going to challenge you emotionally and stay with you long after you finish it, and yeah, maybe even bring a few tears along the way, then The Last Letter is definitely worth checking out.
But keep in mind, it's not going to be for everyone. Go into it knowing what you're getting yourself into. It's going to be intense and it could break your heart.
Great advice. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. Is love really enough to overcome any obstacle, even the ones that seem insurmountable? That's a question that The Last Letter explores in a really powerful and unforgettable way.
And if you do decide to read it, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Let us know what resonated with you and how this book impacted your own views on love and loss and resilience.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into The Last Letter. And we'll be back soon with another deep dive into another book or idea that we think deserves your attention. Until then, happy reading.